Today is the 8th of June, and I'm Richie.
And I'm Bill.
I'm Jason.
And this is episode 3 of the Lost Dice Cast, brought to you by the Lost Dice blog. You can find us at www.lostdice.com. We are 3 longtime friends trying to cover all corners of tabletop gaming here. We all are very involved in the hobby, but we find that there is a bit of a challenge now because we are all fathers with young children. So we're trying to, when we can, cover as much as we can about what we're passionate about. So with that being said, let's talk about what we've been working on or playing lately. I just want to jump in quick. We were going to actually do an episode yesterday. I unfortunately got wildly sidetracked by my child, who wanted to get up and have me read Harry Potter while she ate cashews and drank milk, and that was what we did until 11 o'clock last night. So...
Sounds about right.
It's not even like it was oh, she's sick, oh, I can't do this, it's like, no, she just wanted to be up and eat cashews, so whatever, I rolled with it.
Late night cashews is a good deal.
Night cashews.
That sounds alright.
Premium nuts.
Do I have to be a kid to do this, or like, is there a requirement here?
I'll
read
this
Harry
right
Potter
now
to you while you eat cashews.
Yeah, good, because I'm not reading.
You guys live close enough, you could do this right now. Just saying.
I'm not opposed to this.
So actually, one thing, we did get a little bit of a later start tonight than I would have liked to do, but I want to rant slightly about retail stores and their inability to actually show accurate inventory on their websites. So
you just want to make a case for Amazon, is what you're trying to say?
No, not completely. But it's kind of hard not to sometimes, because actually, so what was one thing that I did observe is what I've been observing is interesting games in the wild at big box stores. So tonight I went to Barnes & Noble. We were looking for a specific book to pick up for a gift for my wife's dad, because we're going out of town to go visit them tomorrow. Their website said they had one in stock, and that was the whole reason I went out to Barnes & Noble. Oh, but then when I got there, guess what they didn't have? Didn't have the book. However, what I observe there now, they've always had a bunch of games, which has always been cool. A lot of interesting stuff. They actually have like a little Chessex dice display in Barnes & Noble.
Really?
Discuss. Yeah, my mind was wildly blown.
I mean,
they had like a relatively large assortment.
Yeah, they've always carried like RPGs, like, or at least like some of the main books from most of the larger RPGs out there. You know, like Pathfinder, D&D, and those kind of things. But I don't think I've ever seen dice in there or anything like that at all. I mean, last time I was in there, I noticed they had all those plastic pop figures or whatever they're called.
Yep, the Funko Pops.
Yeah, and they were like, the place was littered with it. I was like, this is weird. It's kind of a bookstore, but maybe not.
Well, the whole thing is the one that's closest to me is the one in Brookfield, and you have to actually go up to the second story if you seriously are actually looking for a specific book, typically. There's some books on the first floor, but it's mostly, giftables. They actually have, 4 mini, shelving sections dedicated to different games. It's actually broken out by genre now. They actually have a party game section, RPG section, strategy game section. So they are now actually a destination for games in a kind of a weird way.
Interesting. Are they just like full retail price? I've never honestly looked.
Yeah, everything is full price, of course, but... And then I guess to conclude my story is that Target is also becoming a place that I've noticed as well, and I think I've even spoke to it before, where it's interesting what they actually carry in store now, too, where once upon a time they were only Milton Bradley. Now, over the past few years, they actually carry things that are worth playing. But what's interesting about their online representation of what inventory they had in store, they have this weird messed up thing that actually, it makes it look like they have things in stock, but if you order it, it can be in the store. So this book we were looking for, it said they might have 2 in the store. They actually had 7 to 8 copies of the book. So at this point, I guess I would say, people, if you're actually looking for something, it's 2017 and you still can't actually trust a store's website to tell you what live inventory they have. This is not a thing.
For too much.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of sites have had this technology for roughly a decade, it feels like, and it still ain't right. So I'm going to get off it now. All right, so Bill, you wanted to talk a little bit about finally getting finishing touches on your Abyssal Dwarf army.
Yeah, I made a ton of progress. In fact, most of the painting is done. I hit a huge roadblock in that I ran out of grass, which is dumb. So I had to order
The green stuff or the static grass?
No, the little static tall grass stuff that you put on there in patches or whatever. So
Got it.
So I went to go order that stuff, and I spent, no joke, more time trying to find the same color because this project has taken me so many years. They no longer make that product in that color anymore.
Oh no, so it's basically time to make a tough decision, maybe?
Yeah, well, luckily Army Painter is still making similar products, but the size, shape, and color is different. So I found one that's close and mixed them in, and I can tell, but hopefully it's not super obvious, but it's going to drive me crazy forever.
I don't know that
That's
most
too
people
bad.
will notice, though. I mean, I have kind of given up on trying really hard on painting because I'm putting the 1 foot rule super hard into effect. Because it's hard enough to find time to paint right now, but I don't know. I used to really worry about stuff looking bad. Now I just want it to have color on it.
No, yeah, honestly, like anything on the table, like if it's at arm's length and it looks decent, it's not just primer, black or gray or whatever. Like you're good. You're in good shape. Like,
well, thanks to that,
your league's ahead of most people that play these games. Frankly.
All right. Well, thanks to that dip that you turned me on to as well. I mean, that stuff makes all the difference.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Army Painter makes some excellent products for sure. They're not sponsoring this, but they definitely are. An interesting company that makes some really nice products. I've used a lot of their static grass. They have some. They have a wash line, which is like a wash is just like a thin down, low pigment count paint that you can put over the top of stuff, and it sinks into the crevices and cracks, and makes it look like you knew what you're doing and shaded it so that there's multiple gradients of colors. It's a easy cheat to get that sort of to get a flesh tone to have light and dark on it, or to get leather to have dark spots and lighter spots like it's worn. So they have a whole set of those. I use those heavily. Because the color match matches the dip. So if I'm just doing a single figure, I can wash them and have it look the same as if I dip them. So I finished the majority of that. There's a few more I have to dip and then finish their basing, but basically all the painting is actually done, including
congrats.
The fancy dragon abyssal something or other. I forget what it's called.
So just to illustrate to you how out of touch I am with any mini painting, when you started talking about dip, I assumed you were talking about that
tobacco product,
that really good salsa that we had when we were playing at Bill's house last time.
Yes.
And now I'm picturing you just
into the salsa and eating with chips. They're delicious.
dipping your guys into that what was it, cucumber salsa?
Yeah.
And eating it off of them.
That was
delicious.
Really good. I want some of that. Way to go.
That stuff was good. Now you're making me hungry.
Yeah, no, it's a weird thing because like I don't think I've ever truly finished an army. I've always finished units or chunks of an army, like
sure.
Or I've finished enough things that for a specific game, all of the things on the table have been painted, but never like the full collection of miniatures I have for an army. So it's a nice thing to have. I'm looking forward to just I should have a little bit of time this weekend to finish the last few pieces on this, and then we'll be able to take some pictures and we'll get them posted up.
Most
this is a long
definitely.
time coming.
Well, congratulations, man. That's definitely a good personal victory.
Yeah, so heads up, you're on retouch duty, by the way.
Hey, no problem. Happy to do it. So Jason, let's talk about Tabletopia.com.
Yeah, so twice in the past week, actually, I've had the opportunity to play a couple games on Tabletopia, which is sort of a digital tabletop that lets people play board games.
And you can basically thank me for that, for bailing out on RPGing, right?
Yeah, completely. We were like,
excellent.
All right, what do we do now? Well, we could play a board game, and one of the other people in our group actually has a premium membership as a result of being a Kickstarter backer for another couple of months, so we had full access to everything.
Oh, so it's basically when you go into Tabletopia, you get some games, but if you're premium, you get all games?
Yeah, I'm not totally sure how it works. I know some of them restrict options in the games. I looked at one game several months ago when I was checking it out, and it only had a 2-player option. If you wanted more players, then you needed to purchase some sort of subscription.
So
yeah,
is it Is it more so that if the person with premium hosts, then more people can get in?
Only one person needs it. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. So as opposed to like Tabletop Simulator, where you buy it and then play everybody's pirated versions of these games, these are all official on Tabletopia. They're all supported by the publishers that they work with.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. So like,
Asmodee or not Asmodee?
I don't know. I doubt it. I haven't really looked too deep into the catalog, but
so it's everybody but Asmodee. Then I got it. I got you.
Yeah, but so as a result, everything's a lot more refined. Just appearance-wise, and like you start it, and the game is automatically set up and ready to go for whatever number of players that you're playing with. And it works pretty well. We played a couple different games. We played one called Village, another 2-player game called Santorini, and then Samurai, which, Bill, I know that's one because I have your copy of it sitting right next to me, actually.
Samurai's not. That's a fun game.
With Tabletopia and with Tabletop Simulator, they both kind of come with some growing pains because really they're kind of just like physics engines with all of the game assets inside of it.
Right, yeah.
So it's like, okay, I need to figure out how to pick this up or drag it or flip it or whatever. And some of the games like Santorini, for example, doesn't like the physics engine very much. So in that game, basically, it's a 2-player game and you are stacking these pieces of buildings on top of each other and moving your 2 little guys around the board, climbing up on these buildings and trying to be the first person to get on the level 3 of this building. But sometimes when you place a piece down, it explodes off the table and sends pieces flying.
Well, that's because Tabletop Simulator is basically designed just so you could flip the table.
Yeah, basically. So it's like if everything's not lined up right, you might get some crazy glitches where stuff just explodes, and then you just accept that that's the end of the game.
Wow.
But for more standard games where you're not stacking things 3 and 4 high, it worked really well, and we didn't have any issues.
But Tabletopia does fine with all these games.
Oh, we're talking about Tabletopia. I'm guessing Tabletop Simulator might have some similar issues.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
But I know,
so
like
it's
I mentioned,
not tied into that. It's not just like a layer above Tabletop Simulator that manages the games.
I'm not sure what you mean.
Like, so the Tabletopia is not like a service where they put games into Tabletop Simulator.
No, they're separate entities completely.
Interesting.
Yeah, in Tabletopia, you can actually run it out of your web browser. I've had the best luck actually downloading it through Steam and running it that way. But so like I said, Tabletop Simulator is something that you purchase one time, and Tabletopia is sort of a subscription service where you can buy, a month or year at a time or something like that. And they also have an option for, it's like a weekend purchase for like $3 or $4. So, I mean, it's kind of a lot, but, if you're getting a group of people to play some of the bigger games on there, $3 or $4 really isn't that bad if you're going to spend several hours playing, maybe once or even twice. So, I don't know, it's pretty neat. I enjoyed the time that I spent with it so far, and I'm hoping to get some more people to do that more in the future, especially because I am locked at home every evening all by myself with a sleeping child. So this is the way I get to play board games, hopefully, in the future.
That sounds all right.
Actually, the model kind of almost reminds me of the whole idea behind some of like the gaming cafes, where it's like you pay, so what, you pay $5, but you get a whole evening there with your friends and everybody gets to play. Then you don't have to own everything.
Yeah, and I mean, the fact that it has all this official support from the publishers, I would hope that some of that money is going their way to encourage them to keep releasing things on there. One thing that's been pretty neat is I know that there's been, in several instances, games that go up on Kickstarter, and then they have their Tabletopia version available for you to play, so you can actually play it and try it out before you pledge towards it.
That's slightly brilliant.
Neat.
All right, so let's get into the meat of the podcast. So, Billy, you wanted to talk about Shadow War Armageddon.
Yeah, and most of it is just I picked up the rule book for this. Shadow War Armageddon is a skirmish game from Games Workshop. The premise of this game is heavily based, in fact, almost identically based off of a game called Necromunda that Games Workshop made in the 90s. And it is a game and a style of game that it's what keeps me in gaming. It why I enjoy miniature gaming the most. It was the right mix of sci-fi and cyberpunk and war game all at the same time, with a very heavy-handedness in terms of like forcing you into creating narratives and stories by playing the game. And they do this through campaigns and narrative gameplay, and just in the act of creating your gang, you name all your guys. In most war games, where there's 100 figures on each side of the table, no one names their guys. Maybe you gave your general a name or a few other maybe characters on your side or heroes, but in this game everybody is a character. Everybody has their own personality that is behind it.
Is this a 40K thing, or is this its own separate entity?
It is a separate entity, but it heavily cribs from the 40K universe. So, like what I mean by that is the factions and the actual guys fighting inside of this are all 40K based. So you have your Space Marines, and you have your Tyranids and your alien races, and you have your orcs and all that stuff. And the way they position Shadow War is that these are your veteran units, your veteran factions, or crack teams from these larger armies being sent into these hive worlds that need some sort of cleansing or extermination, etc. So the Shadow War is set now in the 40K universe, whereas before it was kind of set off to the side, meaning what I mean by that is these hive worlds are essentially industry built on top of industry, built on top of city, built on top of industry. So if you can, imagine taking New York and piling it on top of New York 100 times until it got real small at the top, that's what a hive city is. It's just city built on city, and all for the purposes of manufacturing war or weapons or whatever you can, whatever the 40K thing is. Their trope is obviously war and more war all the time.
But they've got somewhat of a rich, flavor going on here that they've established.
They do, and they kept some of it, but what really bums me out is they pulled all, Necromunda used to have gangs, and there were houses, there were royal families inside of it, and then the royal families had kids, and the kids were in the gangs that would fight on behalf of their parents, and the upper echelons of these royal families that were into smuggling and drug selling and weapon manufacturing and stuff like that. So there was a much deeper back into it that hooked me years ago. This kind of eschews that and makes light mention of these houses and these these tropes that were there, and then kind of shoehorns in an orc overtaking of this planet, and in the process of them overtaking, they're going from hive city to hive city and slowly taking it over. And they reach these hive cities, and they're having a hard time penetrating into and taking over them entirely to capture the industry or the thing that the wealth that's there that they're looking to conquer.
I guess it's a little unfortunate that they pulled it out, because I do remember that, and I remember really liking that, because to me that almost felt it isn't quite like Dune, but I guess the way in Dune where you have all the different houses and everyone's plotting against each other, you got kind of the whole, I don't know, I always really dug that aspect of it. So and it's a little sad that there's less focus on it, but I suppose on your own table you could bring that back if you wanted to.
Yeah, they blame this in this case, the guy who is in charge of the planet, the mayor or whatever he's called. His name is Von Straub. They still have some good character in the back end where they allude to some of this stuff and how he was bribed, or they allude to actions like this that happened. They allude to backstory that makes it sound like this guy is a total mess up, and that then the higher ups in the actual armies fighting over other planets and in nearby systems are like, oh, that guy's just a jag, and it's his fault that this happened. He messed up. He messed up defending the hive cities, and now it's his problem, and they want to pin the blame on him. I'm glossing over some of the stuff that's there, but it's somewhat interesting. What's weird is that in Necromunda, for example, there were really no Space Marines. There were no guys in giant suits of armor.
And the goggles, those goggles on the cover of the book are intense.
That's a Space Marine scout on the front, and that's actually that's kind of the depiction of the game. The box set that they sold to 50 people before it sold out was the box that included a Space Marine scout or kill team kind of small group, and then an orc kill teams. So like again, small, like I think 10 figures aside kind of size game. So it really lends itself to being able to invest the time in a campaign where you can name all your guys and then things happen to them, they die or they get horribly injured, and
persistent injuries are still a thing.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like from a core rule set standpoint, almost all the same stuff is there from Necromunda. Cleaned up, they fixed a few things from what I can tell, but it's been so many years, it's hard to really compare it. So I'm just going based on my recollection at this point, because it's been so many years since I played Necromunda.
So you have a copy of this then?
Yeah, I got a copy of just the
nice.
rule book. They offered the rule book because, like I said, they made like 50 whole copies of the box set with miniatures and terrain and stuff, which is a dick move. Because I would have gladly bought that, but I didn't. I happened to be busy, and that particular week I didn't pre-order it, and that was it. Like after everybody pre-ordered, and that was that. They didn't have any more copies. It was done.
So, but I mean, you still have like your Necromunda buildings and stuff. So, like, I mean, does that stuff all look like it would repurpose well with the new rule set?
Yeah, I mean, it still plays the same way. A lot of what I find funny is it's the same problem that we had back playing Necromunda was a lot of people that we'd do pickup games at the local stores back then, and they wouldn't want to have that much terrain on the table, but the rules very explicitly describe and tell you to fill the table with stuff.
You have to have a lot of buildings and wreckage to be hiding around.
This game relies on cover, height, tactical advantages by sneaking around, staying hidden, that sort of thing. And if you just have a big open field, none of those rules apply to you because you're standing in the open. And so then it becomes a shooting gallery and everybody's dead in a few turns. And it's really not a lot of fun. This game, because the rules, harken back to that stuff, it's a lot of the same problem. So like there are some mixed reviews that I've read where I've seen people complain, and it's like, well, okay, but like put 10 more things on your table. I know that's hard sometimes because that requires a lot of terrain and pieces and all that, but
right.
Go get a soda can then and throw it down.
Honestly, yes.
Seriously,
absolutely.
yeah.
Go spray paint some like soda bottles and a deodorant canister and a few other things and stack them up. And it's fine. Like that. I mean, that works just as good as anything else in this sort of game.
The nice thing about
back in the day, a lot of the terrain I built back then is exactly that. We tore apart cameras. We tore apart trucks and toy space station and a crane. And I mean, I got all kinds of things that we used for that stuff, and they were just like busted toys, like from Goodwill and St. Vinny's and the like.
Well, you had some really nice modular building pieces where it was kind of like decayed, destructed buildings where there were deliberate spots where you could climb up to another story and you'd be behind a half wall and then you'd go into another room. Like, now I think a lot of people get turned off when they feel like they need to buy those things. But yeah, to your point, I mean, really, if you have a cardboard box and you can cut a couple of holes in it and maybe just hot glue a floor halfway in between it, you have yourself a 2-story building and you're ready to go.
Yep, and if you put a skull in it, that makes it look just like Games Workshop.
Right, and and that's the thing too with a lot of this stuff. It doesn't even have to look pretty. I mean, just throw some stuff down on the table, make some rough things to have the guys climb on, and you can have a really good match. Just use your imagination a little bit, really.
Well, of course. I mean, the whole thing is just an abstraction. Like, I mean, in my head, I when I think about Necromunda, I think about like a skirmish game like this. I think about like gang factions in Blade Runner and stuff like that, where you just have this incredibly dense urban area, that is falling apart, that is decaying, and that's where you're hiding and you're fighting, and there's all kinds of nooks and crannies and little alleyways and broken down vehicles. There's whatever you want to hide behind. All of that stuff is there and exists. So that's what helps feed that. I mean, and it also lends itself to the backstory, and the backstory gets built by doing things like if you're playing a campaign, at the end of a match that you would play against somebody else, you go out and search for money or try to earn money by doing things or by harvesting something. But you get pieces of territory and the like, and they've kept a lot of that same feel there. It's not nearly as detailed as it used to be, where it was like this massive, insane chart of locations and that. But it still feels the same way. You're still sacrificing guys on your team to go get you funds to buy weapons, to buy armor, to buy whatever thing you need to do, or to recruit more young gang guys on your team, and that sort of thing. So
and then you're flush with cash, and then you can get the drugs and the guns.
Yep. They also, like, some of this too also takes out the, like, there were in Necromunda there were some expansions that created and added gangs that were broken, and it's putting it nicely. They were just so overpowered that it was not fun to have them involved in the game. This kind of helps eliminate that by evening the playing field. They gave us points that apply to those teams, and they all apply to current ranges of miniatures. So, I mean, from a gameplay standpoint, you can straight up go buy one box of miniatures and we can start playing this. Like it is that simple. It's not something where you got to go buy 24 boxes of things and all this sort of nonsense. It's very straightforward. Or you can play games with people like me who've got plenty for everybody.
Nice.
Yeah, I mean, overall, I'm glad this game came back out. I hope they continue to support it, and I kind of hope they decide to write back in the old gangs that are out there, because I own most of that, almost all of it actually. I mean, I'm done. The only gang I don't have for original Necromunda is Redemptionists. They were like some cultist kind of guys. And I don't know. I mean, unless I inherit a bag of money, I am not going to be buying those at $15 a piece on eBay.
Right.
But
5 cultists for $10 on the bottom of their website.
Yeah, right. And that's the thing. Yeah, like, I mean, part of, like, for me, the nostalgia is like the original figures and the sculpts they had. And now they've come back with similar but different type, things. But yeah, if you look at their site too, like they also have like the starter kits, like these box sets of, say 12 or 14 miniatures. Like those sets are more than enough figures. You wouldn't even need all of those to start a game. It's that size.
Right.
Like, so while the prices are still incredibly steep to buy that stuff because it's Games Workshop, it's actually relatively inexpensive compared to all the other stuff Games Workshop does. I mean,
well,
it's
at some
pricey.
point in time, I'll be down to try this out. See how it compares to Necromunda.
Yeah, the rule set seems neat. What I like about it the most is that it's easy enough to where like we can show up with teams. These games will go fast. Like most of the scenarios that I've looked at so far shouldn't last more than 45 minutes to an hour. Once you have the rules down, it's one of those things we could do a narrative campaign in the afternoon, play say 3 rounds a piece, maybe 4 depending on time, and that would allow us to progress through and have a storyline. Have some through characters or NPCs and that sort of thing that play into it. And not have to be like invested for weeks and weeks and months to do something like that. So that's it's appealing, and it's for me it's just another rule book, and that's something that I enjoy looking at and reading through and seeing what they did, and they kept all the stuff that I really liked about Necromunda inside it for the most part. Aside from
you said you didn't read books. You just need a guy with goggles kicking an orc in the chest, and you're set.
Pretty much. I mean, I read plenty of like these books, but they're not really books. They're written for like 5-year-olds.
There is something to like the big collection of the rule sets. Like I'm starting to collect piles of rule sets for games that I don't know that I'll ever play. I mean, for RPGs and stuff, but like, I don't know, they're just so damn cool. It's just so neat to see what some of these different between the individuals and companies, just what they come up with for these intricate rule sets, just the thought that goes into it alone.
Yeah, I mean it's the same with other games too. Like for Warhammer Fantasy or Age of Sigmar, I have a lot of those books. Not quite all of them, but I have a big chunk of them, at least the rule book side of it, and some of the back end campaigns. Like those are the ones I enjoy the most. They usually fetch, and they're usually also the most expensive ones too. So I tend not to get a lot of those. But some of the neatest books that Games Workshop makes are not the rule books. They're the ones that supplement the rule books with like a weird through story that fills out the world for you, so that you can pick a spot inside of it and go, have your story take place inside of there. Like in this case, that talks about a specific hive called Armageddon. Like if they release additional fluff books, maybe they would talk about the other hive cities that are on the planet and what's different about them or what makes them unique. That stuff is neat to me, because then that lets me fill in and have a cool story.
Right.
So yeah, that's a
Cool.
neat game. It is not Necromunda, sadly, but it's pretty dang close, and I'll take it.
Yeah.
I mean, because frankly, I was not expecting anything like this to ever happen again from that company. Frankly, they had gone down such a bad tunnel and canceled so many other games that were smaller like this, like Mordheim and War Master and Necromunda and all that. They'd canned those, and it got down to 40K and Fantasy, and then they still had the contract for Lord of the Rings, so they got that going too. But I did not have a lot of faith, and here we are. We got a cool rule book and modern rule set that applies to their current line of figures, so you can get whatever used figures you want. I mean, you can. That's what I like. What I like about it most is you can just go buy whatever you want that fits in 40K. It'll fit into this, and that's pretty.
Nice.
That's pretty slick.
So what did they just get in the habit of like killing off skirmish games? Is that kind of largely what went away?
Yeah, they had a whole line of games called specialist games, and they basically ended up slowly weeding those out and not producing the miniatures for a while, and then they stopped releasing the books, and then all of a sudden they came back and released some books, and then reissued some figures and made some more, and then that disappeared again. It was one of those things like I don't think they made a lot of money on these compared to their other lines of games. And,
well, that's the only reason a company of that size is going to can something at the end of the day.
Right.
Really.
And so hopefully, because this has a lot of overlap with the existing product lines that do make them a lot of money, there'll be support there long term. I don't need updated rule sets every year for this sort of thing, but figures that match the rules, that match what you're carrying, because this game is very much what you see is what you get. Guy's got a knife and a bolt gun. Those are the stats that he needs to use and play on the table. Whereas, other games use an abstraction layer. Well, they all got this type of gun, and maybe one guy has a special gun inside that unit. And there's more gray area there. And some of those guys may have knives on them, but it doesn't really matter.
Sure.
In this game, it absolutely matters because each individual model is represented and has to be accounted for. So that is some of the appeal. I'm excited for it, and hopefully I'll find a chance to get it. More importantly, like the guys that I play 40K with out in Madison, I can almost guarantee you there will be skirmishes that lead up to larger battles, that lead up to a massive fight when they do their weekend-long treks through playing 40K. And,
Heck yeah!
And that stuff is neat because that you just when those games happen, there's usually outcomes that matter that will affect the next game, that will affect the game after that. And there may be small things, but like that's still neat. That's what's fun to me.
Absolutely. Well, cool, man. Definitely something that, like I said, we'll have to find some time because I didn't play a lot of Necromunda, play a little bit with you, but I thought it was absolutely fantastic. So this has a lot. I'm pretty excited to give this game at least one try at some point.
Hell yeah, it'll be fun.
Alrighty, so next week Friday, we were going to be diving back into our D&D campaign. This would have been the third leg of the campaign, but everything is getting very crazy and very busy in real life. So one way we were looking at kind of pushing it forward, and Jason had this idea and I thought it was great, is to consider moving the campaign into Dungeon World. We hit a really good stopping point with the last campaign where it kind of reset the world a little bit, kind of reset the characters. The characters are the same but different. We had to re-roll characters. So we actually did I had email chains going out with the group, and everybody gave me really rich backstories. I really pushed everybody to see, what's your character's history? What's their family history? What are they known for? Now everybody's in this school, so then we did a session where it was like, okay, we rolled characters, and we did how does everybody know everybody? And we kind of built a rich backstory there. So I have that all documented, and I started documenting the world a little bit. But where I kind of hit a stumbling block, where I'm kind of running out of a little bit of time, is that it's not that you can't have the players really drive the narrative in Dungeons and Dragons, but it being a little bit more tactical and technical, it helps to have a little bit of a world established already, which is why for Dungeons and Dragons, there's so many source books. I kind of went rogue when I first started this campaign, and I basically built my own world, which everybody always does, and everybody always thinks they have to do, and I don't regret doing it, but now when it comes to the point where I have to kind of establish a society and governments, and I kind of hate myself a little bit. So what Dungeon World allows us to do is it becomes a little bit more of a player-driven narrative. So I kind of have to have more of a rough idea of what the world is, but it can be pretty fluid. So to me, DMing Dungeon World feels like a win to bring things to a slightly more casual space without having to have the intensity behind all the prep for a D&D campaign.
So is it because you don't like Forgotten Realms? Is that the gist of it? You wouldn't be the first person to say that either.
I don't even know that I don't like it, because when I read it, I actually think it's neat. I mean, someone put a lot of thought into it. It's
for sure.
there.
No,
it's
just generic fantasy.
Yes, right. That is people's gripe about it overall. I mean, that's been a thing for years and years and years. And people are like, yeah, Forgotten Realms is literally just high fantasy, and it falls right in line. It's very stereotypical in terms of, if you read other fantasy, it typically falls, they're in lockstep. And so that was kind of what I was wondering, is if that was part of the decision or not to switch over, was because
part of it.
That's kind of
part of it. Yes,
there's no shortage of high fantasy lately. Let's put it that way.
No, part of it is that, yes, and then the other part of it is my personality, where I typically can't. I have a terrible habit of completely reinventing the wheel. I mean, really, if you're running a campaign right in D&D, that just gives you a background and a flavor and just something to base the world off of. It doesn't stop you from still having a fun game. But for me, I mean, you guys have known me long enough. I just, for whatever reason, I always feel compelled to completely reinvent the wheel. Because, I mean, this was my first time DMing, was coming into this. So I really could have just banked off of what was there. But instead, I had to make my whole own world, which worked out okay.
You're just an overachiever, and I'm a lazy band. Like, I fall back, like, when I was doing DM stuff and playing a lot more D&D once upon a time, Forgotten Realms was just easy to fall into because it was not a hard imaginary stretch to put things into that world for me. Because
one of the nice... Oh, go ahead, sorry.
No, you're fine.
I was going to say, one of the nice things about doing your own world, and I think that probably would be my preferred method of doing it almost always too, is like, if you don't know the world as well as someone else, they're going to have a bad time. Because everyone's going to come in with all their preconceived notions of what the world is. If you say we're in this setting, well, they're going to come with all these years and years, especially in the case of Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, they're going to come with years and years of knowledge of characters and locations and items and all that stuff that you might not have.
Yeah, well, and that's, like I said, that's where it was half of it, because for me, I was pretty new to it all. So, and I knew many of you had already had that history with it, so it was a good level setter.
Yeah, and most of that too, I completely understand that. A lot of the way around that in the past, for previous campaigns that I've been in, the fix was to pick a part of Forgotten Realms that was near the edge, because there aren't a lot of things near the edge of the map. And so that was your way out of saying, well, no, you can't go visit this character or this city. No, you can't go to Baldur's Gate. It's a trek across the entire world, that kind of thing. Not a short, easy distance to cover. And you use that displacement. It still puts you in the same realm to be able to pull from the same cast of monsters and locations and settings and feelings and languages and all that stuff. You can absolutely do all that, but it kept them far enough away from just being like, let's go to Baldur's Gate and be thieves, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm excited for this. I mean, it's definitely going to be a change of pace. I mean, Dungeon World is definitely a lot more narrative based and conversational, I think, than Dungeons and Dragons is. And it'll probably take some mental shifts for us all too, just in the way that the dice and the moves and everything work. Because you don't really just take actions, you say what you're doing, and then if that's what triggers a move in the game, then you're rolling dice. Not every action is necessarily a dice roll, which is a pretty big departure from, making athletics checks and stealth checks in Dungeons and Dragons.
Already missing Dungeons and Dragons.
It's definitely less tactical.
Yeah, I'm not super worried about it, because actually I feel like I was just kind of naturally heading this way a little bit anyway. What I had backed away from is having a lot of pre-planned maps and places, and a lot of the sessions we were doing, it was just a lot of I was letting you guys in your choices dictate. I mean, and this is really the way anybody should be DMing anyway, but it was just a lot of your choices were dictating what happened next in the narrative. But I wasn't really always going in with a plan of exactly what each place was going to be and what it was going to look like. So now this just flips it on its head slightly, where I still have to do a lot of that, but you guys help drive the narrative a little bit more, and it's less about all the setup and having a canned thing ready to go for everybody to explore and tear apart.
Yeah, I mean, for what it's worth, I enjoyed the sessions where we didn't have a single minute of combat as much as the ones where we did. You know, like I think they in my opinion, they weigh equally, and I don't see the differentiation as much, but like for gaming, we're gaming. I'll try something new.
Yeah, I don't think you'll feel it. Yeah, you won't feel it too much because actually, things get more simplistic because like it's less about. I mean, there are still dice rolls and there's still checks. It's just not everything is a check, and the dice still help dictate what happens next. But then part of what happens in Dungeon World is you actually get rewarded for failures. So it kind of, the system pushes you a little bit more to actually try something. Maybe you don't succeed, but then that's how you get XP. So there's actually a bonus to being a little bit riskier and not just always playing it safe.
Oh, so it's like Mario Kart where you're in last place, you can win.
In the same vein, though, I mean, it also really benefits you for like setting yourself up like in the story so that you're not putting yourself in dangerous positions, because really rolling the dice is almost like the worst thing you can do, because if you fail, that's when the game master can hit you with something hard. Because like the enemies in Dungeon World and all of those like world games, they don't actually like take normal actions when the other players are going. Basically everything they do is a reaction to the players in some way. So, rolling dice can be really good, but that failure, it gets you an experience point, but it also might chop your dude's arm off.
Fair enough.
Right. Well, and that's kind of one of the things that, I mean, to a point, like, I do enjoy the combat in D&D to a degree, but then sometimes I just kind of don't, because it's like if you have to, like, because there can still be, 5e is so much better than what, I've heard, there's a couple of different podcasts I've listened to. I'm just listening to people run sessions of 4e. I've never played it personally, but just some of those combats take hours upon hours, and that wasn't usually the case. And I got pretty good at keeping our combat lean and mean, but it's a lot of work.
Fifth, did you say? Sorry, I missed that.
4th edition.
Yeah.
But like, I mean, 5th edition's better than that based on, just what I've heard and what I'm seeing. And like, I was able to give you guys different challenges and scenarios where it worked out so that, it was a combat that had challenge to it and it was meaningful. But even at that, I mean, when you're doing combat and you're still rolling dice and it's like 30 to 40 minutes later, I mean,
yeah, Dungeons and Dragons suffers from the same thing that like the Civ games suffer from. The beginning levels or turns of the game are quick, and I think the most fun part of the game. Once you start going up in level, or later in the years and decades in Civ,
death by 1,000 paper cuts.
Yeah, everything gets bigger and more complicated and takes a lot longer.
Yep.
Well, and there was actually times which you guys never saw or never knew, but I was actually giving a lot of really tough. I would pick an enemy that would be incredibly difficult, that would actually be harder than you should have been able to defeat. But I was actually only giving it like, if you successfully made X amount of attacks, you killed it in this one way or some other. There were some I actually let you guys hack away at the HP because it would create a different dynamic and suspense. But I had read an amazing post on Reddit forever ago, and it was titled something like the 16 HP Dragon, where a guy threw a big, terrifying dragon at... And Jason, you may have even shared this link with me.
Yeah, that's about Dungeon World.
Yeah, where it borrows from that idea instead, because then it's like, it's a bunch of level 1 characters. They're all still heroes, and I mean, they should be celebrated and treated as heroes in the sense of what's thrown at them. But if you throw a dragon at a level 1 party, they will absolutely get decimated. And then this whole like concept plays off the idea of like basically like The Hobbit with Smaug. It's like, it's a big ugly dragon, but God, if you find that one hole in the scales, it is just as fragile as anything else. So the players have a very hard time hitting, but they can still manage to do that miraculous shot because they are heroes that they can drop a giant beast.
I think that's definitely true. Like Dungeons and Dragons, falls into a category where you have to scale to the monsters, and the monsters don't scale to you. So I understand that.
So there's definitely times I threw you guys that 16 HP dragon, but I mean there were enough combats that we did that just dragged on, where the combat in Dungeon World becomes a little bit more narrative and a little bit more suspenseful, because not every combat ends in just we killed the things. It's like, oh crap, things have gotten out of hand and now we're retreating. It'll be interesting. Like I said, it's like one of those things we're going to try it. I mean, I already know Jason and I like it because we did a one-on-one campaign, which Dungeon World's not really built for, but we made it work.
Yeah, not at all.
And we actually had a really good story come out of it. And then because that worked for us, I went, what the heck? I tried that with my brother and we did it online. And I ran a mini campaign for him, and that actually went really well. And he had a really good time with it too. So it's not really designed to do one-on-one, but it can be made to work. So, I mean, we'll try it. If everybody hates it, hey, we all know D&D. We can go right back into it. Converting characters might be a little tricky, but so yeah, I guess next week we'll hopefully give us some stories to start to tell, because next week we'll have to just kind of re-roll our characters to have the stats right for Dungeon World, which really is easy and doesn't take a lot of time because we already have all the backstories created. And I guess we'll just start an intro session and see where we go.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah, see how it goes.
Yeehaw! All right, so
next episode we catalog the catastrophic failure.
yeah, exactly.
It can go perfectly fine.
It's going to go good.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm just hoping that you and your brother are into it, because you both kind of sounded hesitant.
Yeah,
so I hope it lives
to
up.
Apocalypse World, which is instantly like, I have zero interest.
That was my fault.
Yep.
That was my fault.
And
I don't want to be mean, but we can totally blame that on Jason.
I mean, it's just like,
because when you ran our solo Dungeon World campaign, you did amazing. But then again,
I had the benefit of we did it over text. So
yeah, but Apocalypse World was also the first thing you ever DM'd, and you had just barely learned the system.
Yeah, it was intimidating. I remember. So in Apocalypse World, you don't plan anything ahead of time. You basically create the characters and then you follow them in their footsteps for a day, basically for the remainder of the session. And I remember we created the characters, we took a break, and I was like sweating and just going, what are we going to do? I have no idea.
Yeah.
This sucks. This is going to be terrible. And I think it turned out okay, but I think
it wasn't
I know all of the ideas and things that we were going to maybe do in the future still. So it has that positive tint to it in my head, where you guys were just kind of like, what are we doing? I don't know. Whatever.
Well, and that
D&D starter set now.
I mean, that was like what? That was 4 years ago?
It was a long time.
5 years ago?
Yeah, it was quite a
3 or 4.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, 4 years ago. And then that, for me, that was the first time I had ever actually, and I can't believe it took me this long in life to play a tabletop RPG, but that was the first time I had ever done a tabletop RPG. So I was completely new to it. I had no idea how to even really interact with it. So it was a lot of weird firsts, which is what I think made it so odd. But I don't think the world systems are real. I think they are good. It was a weird situation for all of us.
I mean, lots of people play them, but I mean, ultimately, it's just a matter of finding the game that works for the group, and we'll see where this lands.
I think I can do wonders with it. We'll see.
Yeah, it's worth trying.
All right, so let's hit it and quit it. Let's do the what are you looking forward to? Bill, you want to give us a quick little bit about Warhammer 40K 8th edition?
Yeah, they've done something weird, and they've actually talked about the game before they released it. That's never really happened before from Games Workshop. In the show notes, there'll be a link to their community site. Their Warhammer community site is something new that they're doing, where they actually post things about their games and talk about their games with people. Once upon a time, Games Workshop made a very distinct point to not talk to their players unless you were in their store and buying stuff from them directly. And
solid business model.
Yep,
it seems like they're really working on that lately. There's so much competition for their business now that they must have realized they need to turn things around.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. So customer feedback is important?
No.
Weird.
The guy who was in charge left, and the person who's in charge now actually understands what these games are, I think, is what it comes down to. It sounded I mean, from what you read online, it sounded like there might have been kind of a toxic culture of people in there, just trying to appease board members versus actually making a game to play. And there's no reason you can't do both. I mean, like this is a hobby, and it's people's extra money and disposable income. You gotta play along with them, or they're gonna go spend their disposable income elsewhere. Over the years, they got rid of their Facebooks, they stopped putting stuff on YouTube, they closed their own forums down, they actively sought out to shut down other sites involving talking about Warhammer, that kind of thing, cease and desists, all kinds of terrible things. What's neat is that Warhammer community is now a place where they're actually posting things like, hey, check this out, here's how the shooting phase is going to work in the new game, here's how wounds are going to work, here's how stats are going to be looking and how they're changing from the current edition to the next, and they're posting little videos. They got people that are writing the fluff, making videos and talking about it. They got people that are writing the rules, making a video and talking about it for 10 minutes, and this is just completely mind-blowing. So I'm excited that they're actually trying to put out a new version of the game. There's a bunch of people online that if you dive into comments, which is a terrible place to go, there's a lot of people that are concerned that they're going to quote unquote Age of Sigmar the game, and what they mean by that is Warhammer Fantasy, before it became Age of Sigmar, was a very complex rule set with a lot of nuances in it and a lot of broken things inside of it as well. Age of Sigmar pared all of these rules, like dozens and dozens of pages of rules, down to 4, and made a very tight core rule set that doesn't leave a whole lot to the imagination in terms of how you should play the game. There are some things that are still, for those that have played the older games, there's things that want to creep back in, that are no longer there. But after playing Age of Sigmar a couple of times now, it's a pretty solid rule set, and it's actually very fun to play. It's way less complicated to teach, and maybe that's just because I played a lot of war games. It was easy for me to pick up. That is probably the case, but I feel like I could teach it a lot easier than I could teach older Warhammer Fantasy. It's the same thing that makes Kings of War appealing to me. Same concept, same idea.
So is this new edition, when's it come out?
I think it comes out later this month. They put up pre-orders. I pre-ordered their core rulebook and some of their Imperial Codex books. Warhammer 40k typically there's a core rule book, there is a codex or a set of rules for your army, and then obviously the figures and dice and stuff that go for your army. They took all of the existing lines of miniatures, existing armies, and put them into stat books. This is something that Warhammer used to do a long time ago. When I started playing as a kid, you would basically buy like a bestiary book or an army book, and all of the armies were inside of it, and you didn't have to buy one book for each army. And then they got away from that, and they went to one book per army. So now,
that's crappy.
Yeah, so now they released like 2 books, and that covers like 15 armies. They're relatively inexpensive. I think they're only $25 a piece, which is, if you buy things from Games Workshop, that's extremely cheap. Almost none of their books are under $50. For reference, the Shadow War Armageddon book was a $40 book, and I thought that was a bargain because most of their books are extremely expensive. The print quality and other things, they do make nice books. It's not like they just give you a stapled pamphlet. It's nice stuff, but that's a whole other thing. But what is neat is that they're doing this, which means for the 2 armies I have Imperial Guard or Astra Militarum, because they couldn't actually trademark Imperial Guard, and Space Marines. And they so there's 2 books that will cover all the dudes I got sitting in cases, which is pretty great. I'm not sure. One other part of the rule set that I thought was interesting was that they had an Apocalypse rule set previously. I'm not sure where that's headed, but that's definitely coming up. I'm sure in the near future, hopefully they'll have some sort of rule set for it. Apocalypse is just a large scale version of the game where you play with hundreds and hundreds of figures instead of 100 each or something like that. So yeah, it's
because it needs more scale.
The scale is definitely fun. I played most of the 40k I've played has been at that scale, and I enjoy that a lot. but only because the people I do that with are very understanding of the rules and are there for the story and not like going to nitpick you on rules and quirks and little stuff like that. So, but yeah, no, looking forward to it. Later this month, I want to say end of the month, the books will all ship out. The game will be out. A lot of people are already posting videos of pre-release stuff, so I'm assuming there's copies out now.
All right. Nice. So Jason, you're going to actually get to do some weekend gaming?
Yeah, I'm excited for it. The game group that I'm part of meets twice a month, and I've been making maybe one of those or less every month, so it feels like it's been quite a while, and I'm excited just because there's some bigger games that people are talking about playing that I might get to play, like Game of Thrones, which you guys are all familiar with, or New Angeles, which is a game that takes place in that Netrunner universe, which I really like that universe a lot. And this is sort of a like a political negotiation type of game, sort of like that Battlestar Galactica board game. I don't know if you guys ever played that or not, but
no,
kind of replaces it because I don't think that Fantasy Flight has the license for Battlestar Galactica anymore, so they had to release their own their own game that falls in that line. But yeah, I'm just looking forward to actually getting to sit down and play a bunch of games for a day.
Cool.
That's awesome. So, I actually we haven't played this in a very long time, but I picked up a copy of The Resistance.
What?
Nice.
Yes. I'm gonna bring it along, camping this weekend. We're going camping with my wife's family, and then also I think this is something that I wanted to just have around as like a family game in general for family get-togethers. Just because it can be fun. It's not hard to teach. I mean, this is a game that really, if you just had like a pair of scissors, some stuff you could cut out, and like a deck of normal playing cards, you could probably do your own Resistance without
That's
actually
how we
owning.
played it before the retail versions came out.
I was just saying,
exactly.
You made put something together, didn't you, Jason?
Yeah, it was just playing cards.
Right.
And it worked incredibly well. And that's the thing, too. It's easy to teach. I always feel a little bit bad because my brother-in-law, like, he has... let me look quick. He's recently gotten Time Stories and Dead of Winter. And they're both relatively involved. And every time we have a get-together, he brings them. And I feel so bad because we never get around to playing them. Because it's like, by the time everybody does dinner, we finish hanging out with the kid... And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, now it's 9 o'clock and I need to go lay down.
Dead of Winter's not that fun either.
No?
I don't know. I'm not a fan of it. I play tested the crap out of it. My name is in the rule book.
Fantastic.
And I don't know. I got sick of it fairly quickly.
Okay. Yeah, well, so actually I have a couple of questions for you on that, but like, so I'm hoping that with this, I'm sure they'll bring some games along camping, I don't know, and everybody usually brings like Cube or like something that's more of like a yard game kind of thing, but I'm kind of hoping that, it's like, hey, if anybody wants to play a quick card game that's something a little different, this should be easy enough to teach and something that doesn't take too long. So
that's something you can play around a campfire too, you don't need to be sitting around a table.
Exactly. So yeah, that's why I always feel a little bit bad, because whenever I get together with them and we have everybody staying at our house, it's like by the time you could actually play a game, it's like it's too late and everybody's going to bed. Because it's just never, you need to like dedicate a day to just sitting down and be like, okay, today we are playing board games, which then you can't do with a 3-year-old because they knock all the pieces down because they get pissed off because now you're not paying attention to them.
They're bad gamers.
They're young children are terrible strategy gamers. But so, like, tell me a little bit about, like, that Time Stories game sounded fascinating to me, but it sounds super complex, so there's no way that's a quick game. But I definitely have to try it at some point.
That one, what's interesting about that is you pretty much play it through once, and you know the game and can't repeat it. Well, by once I mean you play several sessions. Basically, the idea behind that game is that you are like going back in time or somewhere in time and basically trying to complete some sort of mission or time loop type of thing where you can fail repeatedly, and each time you play it, you're trying to like refine the way you go through it. Sure. So once you know like the best way to complete the game, then you can't play it again. But for that game, they keep releasing more and more content for it.
That's interesting. So yeah, that's definitely not a quick game. And then so like Dead of Winter, is that just another like zombie survival game where it's
zombie survival with somewhat of a social deduction element to it, similar to like The Resistance, where there's somebody that can be a traitor. The game is mostly cooperative unless there is that traitor. I don't know. It's fun for a few games, but like I said, I played it I think 10 times in the span of 3 or 4 weeks.
That's too much for any game almost.
Yeah, I burnt out on it pretty quick. So when I actually got the copy of the game, I played it once or twice then and felt like I kind of saw everything the game offered, so I traded it away.
Yeah, sometimes you just have that. Not everything has that infinite replayability to it, and that's always, I would think, and like I know I've mentioned before, I'm working on a game concept which I've had no time to absolutely touch, but that's definitely the hard thing. It's like, how do you come up with something where if you want it to be that long living game on that shelf where you know you can always go back to it, like how do you create that? I mean, there's so many games out there now.
Luckily, nobody plays games like that anymore. They play it twice and they're done.
Yeah, I know everything's become so disposable, which is a little sad to me. But I mean,
yeah, just put your stickers on it. There's only so many. No problem.
Yeah, there's only so many ways to invent different board games at this point. Well, I guess on that sad note, that's probably a good place to cut it, don't you think, guys?
Absolutely.
Fantastic. So anything we've mentioned, any links that we have to share, will wind up in the show notes. If you found us through a source other than our website, again, our website is www.lostdice.com. Just look for the post for episode 3. Show notes will be there. So thanks for listening, and hope you find your dice.